All right, so we're gonna start off with a reel that I took off of my rod not that long ago, as far as I was concerned, it's completely fine. But I wanted to show you how easy that some of it can actually get a little bit dirty. And then I actually made a purposeful snag to show you how to remove a bit of line that gets caught up under there. It's actually surprising how hard it is to get it snagged when you're trying to do it versus when it accidentally happens on its own. All right, so we're going to do some basic reel maintenance on a spinning reel. So first things first, I'm obviously going to check to make sure if there's any excessive amount of grime on the outside. Of course, I'm going to remove that. There isn't right now, so if there was, I would have taken, like a cloth or something and just removed off any extra debris. If you dropped it in the sand by any means, you might want to give it a light rinse ahead of time, so to make sure to wash off any extra physical sand or grit that's on it. You never want to use high pressure water because it could force it into your reel a little bit more. All right, so now what I'm going to do is obviously unwind this drag here just like this. Here we go. And when I remove it, I'm just going to make sure that put it down gently, make sure that there's no other parts coming off. And now you can see in here, hope you can see, there actually is a little bit of grime and dirt on that reel. A little bit of debris there that obviously it's good to know that the reel felt fine, but there was some grit in there that could have potentially got to the inner workings of my reel. So it's really great to, even when you think it's completely fine, just to give it a quick look at the end of the season to remove any of that grit so you're ready for the next season. So I'm just going to remove that now, and you will see what I had already explained. Put that right there. Sometimes you get your line caught up underneath here, and it's not pleasant. It can cause a lot of damage. It really is going to make your casting frustrating, or when you go to use your reel, or when you go to reel in to try and remove. So what you want to do is make sure you remove that. And while you're removing it, you want to make sure you're not doing any extra damage to your reel. And like I said before, I did this for demonstration purposes. Just gonna remove all that extra line. You'll find actually with kids or possibly new anglers who aren't very familiar with the bail system, you will get quite a bit of line like that, and we get that happen all the time with our loaner rods that we send out. So it's something that I'm used to on a daily basis, but you need to learn to listen for that sound. If you hear a bit of like a twangy sound on the inside, you can tell that there's a bit of line in there, and it's important to get it out as soon as you've identified that. All right, so we've pulled off those two parts there. I've made sure I've removed that extra line. I'm gonna have a good look here to see if there's any real dirt. There really isn't. I'm gonna give it a wipe down in a second anyways, but I'm also going to remove this gear here very gently. There's also some metal washers in there as well. So I wanna remove it and remember which orientation it came off in. I'm just gonna place it right beside everything else so I know exactly where everything is. And that exposes this pin here so we can have a better look to see if there's any dirt or grime or anything underneath it. If there is, we're just going to give it a light wipe with, I like to use either like a lint-free cloth, or I've got some napkins here. I find that I'm using paper towel as a surface to work on, but I find it sometimes has a bit of fibers, and I don't really want those fibers on my reel. So I'm just going to give it a little wipe in here just to get off some of the grease, any of the extra stuff. You can see some of the manufacturer's grease that's been put in there from the beginning of the reel, but you can also see some of this dirt and grit that clearly got underneath that cap. So I'm going to clean that out just to make sure everything's ready for my next season. So I'm going to clean it out with a paper towel first, just because I don't want any of this debris to get put into my reel. And I'm careful not to remove any of that grease because it actually looks fairly fine. I don't think I need to replace any of that. I'm not going to get really hardcore. This is just a basic maintenance video. So you can see there's no threat of dirt that's going to move its way into the inner workings of this reel. The rest of it looks fairly fine. So now I'm going to remove the handle here. I'm going to hold on to it this way, and this button over here will unscrew. It does take a while because it's a long screw. And now I'm going to remove the handle as well. Make sure there's no grime and dirt on there. If you would, you kind of give it a quick little wipe. Anytime you're taking it apart, you want to make sure you're really careful and never go further than what you're comfortable with putting back together. I'm just giving this all a quick wipe. This reel was actually fairly new to me this summer, so it's not in very, very bad condition at all. I had a little bit of dirt on the inner side here. Cleaned that up. I'm pretty happy with it. This is the bail. That's the mechanism that you're pulling back and forth, and you're opening up to cast. And then as you go to reel, it clips itself back over. So if you're finding that when you're casting and it's, and you're trying to reel and you're moving that handle and it's getting caught, there could be the possibility of some sand or grit or any sort of disruption in the inner workings here. So I'm just gonna show you how you can help move that mechanism. In this kit here, I have a handy dandy screwdriver. And you can just open that up right here. Just clean that out there. Add a little bit more grease on this side here. So I'm just gonna put that back on here. Very gently. Put the screw back in. Now you want to make sure that you've got the screw aligned properly, because the last thing you want to do is strip it as you're trying to forcefully put it back in. Never force something, always want to do it very delicately and gently. All right, now I'm going to look back over to this other side of the bail here. I'm going to highly suggest you don't actually fully remove this screw. You're just going to back it out a little bit and put a little bit of grease in there. And use a clean one of these applicators. I can get it to cooperate and help move that around. Okay, now I'm going to squish it back on and help it move a little bit to get it in between the joints there to make sure it's moving. And then I'm going to wipe off any of the excess grease just because I don't want it on my fishing line, on my fishing stuff there. There we go. Now it's really important to make sure that everything in your reel is moving smoothly and isn't obstruction free, be it dirt, be it extra line, or even just lack of grease or lubricant, because any obstruction is really going to slow down your reel, make it harder, and you want to make it as easy as possible. So I already mentioned how when you remove this initial spool, sometimes there will be line caught around this pin here. There's also another area here underneath your reel right there that you can also get line caught there. So I've already removed some parts. I'm already at this stage now, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this screw here, which is what prevents this nut from moving. So I'm just going to pull this off. Whoa. Making sure to not lose my screw. And then I'm going to remove this nut. Okay, put it there. And then that means that this whole bail system can now come up. There we go. And be removed. So if you had any line that was caught around here, you could then come in and remove it. So everything here is clean. If I needed to, I would be wiping this out. All right, now I'm gonna put a bit of grease on here. Some grease around, there we go. Now I'm going to put my bail housing back on. And then I'm gonna put this screw back in there. And of course it's super itty bitty. So I've heard tips of people saying to put a little bit of grease on the end of your screwdriver to help it kind of stick in. But I've also found if you just work with gravity, hold it up like this and then connect, I find it much easier. All right, so that's back on. Still flowing very smoothly. Next, I'm going to put back on, and I actually don't know if I looked at and swabbed this. I'm gonna make sure that before I put it back on, make sure it was clean. Pin right here. Careful, because sometimes it gets caught on some of those threads. You want to just maybe just gently encourage it on. Now I'm going to make sure there's lots of grease here. I've already got lots, I think, but just for humor's sake, the inner workings right there. All right, and if you'll notice, I just want to put it back on nicely like that. And I've already got a bit of grease on there, so I know that this surface here is going to contact with that. Put that on. And again, whenever you're tightening something, you want to make sure that you've got the threads lined up properly. There was one time I I put this on one time and it was a bit askew. So you want to make sure you're very careful not to strip any of your threads or of your equipment. My handle, and this had grease that I had removed earlier. Come on, cooperate. Now, if any of your reels are, let's say, like excessively dirty, you can actually remove some of the grease and the grime with degreaser, which I have in this kit here off to my left. I didn't see the need to because this reel specifically was very, very clean. I've only used it a couple times so far this year. If you really need to and it's really dusty, dirty, whatever, you can use the reel cleaner. I didn't feel like I needed to in this case. I probably would after I've used it a full season. And I'm gonna put the handle back in. Of course, it could go in either direction, but as I'm a right-handed angler, my handle goes on the left-hand side. I'm gonna put it back in, just like this. It's on nice and tight. All right. It's all cleaned up. Now I'm also gonna probably just give it a little polish on the outside just to make sure if there's any like resident dirt and grime, to kind of get that off, keep it shiny and new and ready for my next season. Like I said before, if you don't feel comfortable taking your reel apart to the capacity that I did, you really don't need to. You can just take off this initial spool, give it a quick clean, put it back on. I like to give it a good look. I have a tendency to hand my rod to my kids occasionally when I've hooked onto a fish. So I know that there's some chances it has had some rough times. So I like to make sure I give it a good look at the end of the season so I'm ready for my next season. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much. If you really enjoyed it and you made it this far, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so we can keep more fishing content coming your way.